SJ. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. This morning we're going to be enjoying a nice chat with our Principal Chief, James Floyd, who's graciously made time in his schedule to come down and talk to us. We're going to see how the tribe has been doing since his State of the Tribe Nation speech earlier this year, and kind of see what the progress is and chat about a couple of other important issues. So first of all, welcome, Chief. We appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Glad to be here.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we give you the first few minutes of this program to kind of give us a feel and overall concept of how the tribe is doing since last you addressed them like this.
Well, I think that we continue to progress and take advantage of opportunities that are before us. And I think that bodes well for the economy of the nation, the welfare of the people of the nation, and for our government. So we continue to work on a wide range of things. There's never seems to be a lack of things to be involved in. And so we continue to work and devote our efforts to that, geared toward just expanding the services and jobs and resources to the nation. So it keeps us very busy.
Well, let me toss a biggie at you, I guess, about the national scene. The president has come out with a new budget that looks like there are a lot of cuts to programs that are important to us. Interior's talking about changing the way things are done, land into trust kind of things. What do you see there as far as the federal government is concerned? Is it kind of a dangerous time for us? Is it tough, or are we going to have to do some belt tightening, or is there some daylight there?
Well, the budget was released earlier this week, and I've yet to really see all the details of it. I know some of the concepts and some of the objectives of the budget, and you're correct. The domestic program cuts are troubling to hear about. Fortunately, I think we have people who will defend that and defend those programs in Congress, and we will have the opportunity to go in and get our voices heard. I think it's also great that we can work with the Intertribal Council, the Fife civilized tribes, in developing positions, and the fact that cumulatively we represent more Indian population in the United States than anybody else. And so we want to use that to our advantage in talking about the benefits of continuing the programs to people in eastern Oklahoma, including the Mvskoke Creek Nation. So we're going to be speaking about that here in the coming weeks. I know that on the House side there was a hearing last week. We didn't participate in that one, but it's preparatory for the appropriation hearings, and so we will at least have statements prepared for the record if we're not there in person to have testimony, to make sure that the things that we see important, whether it be elderly nutrition program, child care, education, health care, land into trust, those things we already have in place. They've been serving people for a long time. We can demonstrate what good they've been providing, and we'll make that known to everybody who's in Congress. So when they make the decisions as they consider the 2020 budget, we can hopefully turn things around and either restore or keep into place those programs that are vital to us.
Now, we do have a bit of daylight on the House side. We have 2 Native American women now who are members and heading up some important committees. But from my experience, the new congressperson is going to have a rough time getting stuff done until they build up some relationships and some deals and things like that. So, I know this wasn't on our list, but what do you think about having those 2 congresswomen up there now looking out for?
I think that benefits us very well. I've been able to meet with both of them. They're both from neighboring states of Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Kansas, where we have pretty large populations in Wichita and in Albuquerque. So they represent those areas. And so Mvskoke Creek people are their constituents in their home states. But in their committee assignments, they will be dealing with Indian issues. And I think they recognize the importance of the Mvskoke Creek Nation. And we will stay in touch with them. I think it was last month when I was in Washington that I was able to meet with both of them. And it wasn't the first time. So they're aware of us. They're aware of what we've done and the things that we would like to do. So I look forward to working with them on their different committees. They got their staff in place now, and I'm sure on my next trip up there, I'll be meeting with the staff in extended conversations just to talk about the issues that is under consideration currently.
Have you had the chance to meet the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs?
I did before she was confirmed. I guess Tara Sweeney is one you're talking. Yes, I met her when she was making her rounds in Congress. We happened to be in the same congressional office at the same time, and so I've got to have a conversation with her. Found out we have some mutual friends, so that connection is helpful. And but she's inherited a very tough responsibility, as you're aware. I mean, that office is just full of hot button topics, and we'll see how she holds up to all those things.
Well, it was my impression when I looked at kind of the agenda that the president and his people had laid out, and then she has to come in and enforce it, so to speak. And some of those things are not very kind to tribal governments. So that's, you got to do that. Although you want to do the best for your own people, you still got to do what your job is. Okay, well, let's talk about local stuff here. Let me start with the SHIELD Act, of course, which is critical to yours truly and the rest of the staff of Mvskoke Media. We've been kind of back and forth on the freedom of the press issue. We were really scared for a while, and then things have been worked out in meetings and consultations, and now a SHIELD Act is there to protect the media, or our reporters and people. So give me your...
Well, I think the last time we spoke, I felt optimistic that we could work something out, and we were kind of in the midst of, I guess, the discussions and negotiations about that outcome that would eventually be passed by the National Council. Today, I can say I feel comfortable with what we have. The SHIELD Act was there for several things. One, to provide independence, but to kind of insulate members of the media from, persuasion or involvement in your business, and to have you reveal your sources. We've insulated you so that you don't have to do that. There's protections in place so you can keep your sources confidential and be free from political interference, and to work independently, and to have that act in place, I believe, provides a security for you and any of the media. It extends to radio, television, and the print media. And I think that's one thing that I felt very passionate about, make sure that's in place. And so we have that in place. We also wanted to make sure that that the media products were retained by media, and so we have that in place as well. It isn't set up as an independent agency, but it very much mimics what an independent agency would present. We have the editorial board authority again, and we're actively working on looking at individuals that could be recommended for those two of those positions. The third will be named by the other two, and that needs to be in place by May. So we're progressing in the kind of administration, I guess is to say, of the Media Act, and hopefully each one of you feel that and can go do your work like you should.
You mentioned the editorial board there. Now, just my own conjectures, if the concerned members of the council had met with that board and discussed their concerns, we could have avoided a lot of things. And you say, well, you're doing too much negative stuff. And I said, well, we don't make the news, we just report it. And if we're getting a little too close to home, well, so be it. It's nothing that we're out on a grudge or anything like that. But if they'd had that discussion, you know, they could have, the board could have brought it back to us and said, well, they're saying that you guys are A, B, C, D. And we could have adjusted or, you know, conceded or whatever we needed to do to relieve their concerns. Will that board be used perhaps in that capacity?
As we go forward, I think when the board is in place, you know, the purpose of the board is to work with the staff of media in the daily decisions of editorial content or whatever you may have. They're there to support you. And we wanted them to be there in that capacity. I think in the past, the charge for them was too broad because it really gave them management issues, and these folks are, their expertise is, you know, very specific. And I think we've removed some of that responsibility for them, have them specific to the news and editorial content, and to be available to the staff of media anytime they want it. I think that from my perspective, and hopefully that of the council, we see the board as being similar to other boards that both the chief and the council work with, and we can have those meetings and talk about issues that they may raise or that we may have. And so, you know, I think that going forward, I feel optimistic that those conversations can occur.
Yeah, all right, let's get down to a couple more business-type questions. Maybe you could give our listeners an idea of the financial security of the tribe, the permanent fund and whatever revenues that we're dealing with. Are there big, huge liabilities we should be aware of?
Well, first of all, I think the financial viability of the nation is probably better than it's ever been. I feel pretty confident that it is. The permanent fund remains intact and is growing and has been protected from, you know, any loans to it. And my goal is to, you know, continue to grow the permanent fund and to not shoulder it or to take any resources from it, because it grows. You know, it draws interest, and we have revenues that continue to go into that fund so that it can grow. One thing that I've learned as a principal chief is the value of having a permanent fund in terms of economic development. We were in a meeting yesterday, and one which I attended with financial advisors, and when they look at the fact that we have a permanent fund and the size of that, it really separates us from a number of tribes across the United States. We don't have the largest one by any means, but the fact that we have one probably puts us in the top 5% of tribes in the United States. And the fact that we have hundreds of millions of dollars there, again, may not be the largest one, but we do have security there. I see my responsibility is to keep that security in place and make sure that that fund is managed in a way that it continues to grow. And I'm pleased to say that it has. And we kind of weathered the stock market issues from last fall. And we have good advisors and managers on that, and the investment board. So I think we're doing our due diligence on that. But the importance of it, beyond just having that money for our future, is what it provides in a message to financial advisors and lenders, because they look at that and say, you have this, it's not attached to anything. And so we become a low risk to a lender. And that having us be a low risk means low interest rates on money that we may borrow. And that puts us in a high category of, I guess, reliability in payment. We've got a good payment history on loans that we've had. And we're really a low debt tribe. We just have, you know, the gaming facility in River Spirit that we're paying off, the hospital at Okema, the clinic at Eufaula, and the health department's making the payments on both of those. So we're not in any condition that would be a warning sign to any lender.
So there are, well, let me ask you, are there any financial concerns that maybe you're dealing with now or on the horizon?
I think the things that we're dealing with are the normal business management issues with any investment that we have, whether it be through MNBE or One Fire or gaming. We have either executive branch or National Council representatives or reports to the National Council, which I also will sit in on, which we can gauge the progress of things. Some of the investments that we have, there's ups and downs in those businesses that we've invested in. But I think at this point we have a better handle than I've seen on the viability of businesses. And so we may be, selling our interest in some businesses or increasing our presence in the businesses to make sure that they provide returns to us the way that we intended. Now, it takes time, takes effort to make sure that we're involved in the management of those companies, but we should be, because that's our investment. And those are the things that I think that maybe the public doesn't see, that consumes a lot of our time, is that you need to be involved in the operation of those businesses because we chose to invest in them, and we need to be involved to make sure they return revenue to the nation as they were intended to.
Now, we have the new facilities opened, Eufaula, as you mentioned. There have been changes here, even in Okmulgee and Okema. New programs being launched. I understand there's a major initiative dealing with opioids and things like that. So is our healthcare situation in good financial shape? And as far as feet on the ground, do we have enough people? I mean, is it all right?
Well, in terms of the resources, yes, I believe that it is. We get a monthly report from the health department. They're operating in the black. We're very pleased about that. We have, as you mentioned, the opioid issue, several things going on. We're involved in litigation. Mvskoke Creek Nation is one of the what they call bellwether tribes on that issue, and so if there's any settlement going to be made, we're going to be one of the first ones there to determine the tribal share, and I think that's significant for us. This month, we will also be having our first pain management opioid conference at River Spirit, and people from probably throughout the nation, United States, and within Mvskoke Creek Nation are invited to attend to begin to educate about the opioid crisis, the different dimensions of it, whether it's in our own home, our own family, or whether it's in the community or the Creek Nation as a whole. And so we can be better informed of our individual power, I guess, in trying to overcome this opioid crisis. It's a national crisis. And I think that we've been well represented on the national level in litigation, and I think that's very helpful to the nation as well.
I heard in the news this morning Johnson & Johnson's now on the hook for a lot of activities that are not quite on the up and up. So is that a hopeful sign, I guess?
Well, there's a number of people that are involved, either the manufacturers, the wholesalers, the distributors, or even the local pharmacy or the national pharmaceutical chains. And those national chains are present here in Okmulgee and many towns throughout the Mvskoke Creek Nation. There's one court that's overseeing all the litigation from the state of Oklahoma, Mvskoke Creek Nation, and tribes, and individuals. And that's, I believe, in Cleveland. And so I believe the judge there is looking at trying to get some out-of-court settlement, or we're going to have some massive trial that occurs with possibly hundreds of individual defendants. Mm-hmm. So I think that to avoid a trial, there may be a settlement, and these individuals will be coming to the table, and that's when the benefit of us being one of the early litigators on the opioid crisis will help us, because we will be there to and be represented when the determination is made of, we've well documented our adverse outcomes and the impact that's had on Mvskoke people. I feel very confident about the data that we have there, so when the decision's made, we'll be well prepared.
I've experienced action with the health department where they called you in to do a medical management test or review, just to see if our people are getting hooked on tramadol or whatever else. So that's encouraging. Get you half a day off from work too. Let's move on now. The Stigler Act, a lot of people saw that as a wonderful evolution. Is it in place now? What are the, direct benefits to Mvskoke people?
Well, this morning I had my weekly meeting with my realty staff, and we continue to have Stigler Act outreach events. I think we have the next one tomorrow, I believe, in Cromwell, which the realty staff goes out and is able to communicate to community members what the act means, and then have the time to answer questions and work on individual cases. The Stigler Act, we're very pleased that it got passed, was signed into law. It removed the blood quantum requirement, which was 1/2 for the 5 civilized tribes, to inherit restricted land. And so now, in addition to that, the law provided for, freer access of information and a better definition of the land for economic development, right-of-way protections and management, and those things, we'll see the outcome of that probably within the next couple of years, if not before that. But by having restricted land identified, its ownership determined, and knowing that there's the ability to transfer that from one generation to the next from now on, I think is very significant. So if somebody had restricted land that had good potential for economic development, the family now can determine if they want to enter into a long-term agreement with a business, and that can be placed on their land, and that they receive the benefits from it. So it's not just the oil and gas lease or the surface lease. There's other opportunities that can be provided to the tribal member. And I think that's significant because it provides additional resources, not to the nation, but to the individual or the individuals that have an interest in that restricted land.
Well, I certainly do. And those revenues have paid off a few bills for me, so I appreciate them being there and that good, solid future there. Let's talk about one more subject here, and then we'll take a break. Sovereignty. Now, we've heard the term being kicked around all kinds of places, and people wondering, how are we going to butt heads with the states, companies, and the feds, particularly when we have an administration that it isn't particularly supportive? And a couple things come to mind, the Murphy case, where we could end up with jurisdiction over a huge chunk of Oklahoma, and VAWA. Now that we've had some action taken there. So where does that leave us as far as the overriding subject of sovereignty? Does it strengthen it? Does it give a demonstration of what we are? What do you think?
Well, I think that, first of all, understanding of what sovereignty means and how it's applied in different situations. We know that the Murphy case, to give an update about that very quickly, is, it's pending a decision by the Supreme Court. But we need to also focus on what it is and what it isn't, and communicate what it is and what it isn't. And our folks have been doing that. We've been reserved in our comments because it is, still pending, and our folks have been very cautious in getting statements out. But, that is a criminal matter, capital criminal case. The thing that's most important about that, I think, for us, is that the 1866 treaty and the reservation boundaries of the Mvskoke Creek Nation were never diminished. Now, should the ruling come out in our favor, I don't think it's going to be, an overnight, suddenly the Mvskoke Creek Nation has jurisdiction on everything, because it's a criminal case. So we would then look at things such as VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. We've exercised our sovereignty in the prosecution of non-Indians and their violence against Indian women within the boundaries of the Mvskoke Creek Nation. We'll continue to do that. As they file the police reports, and the Light Horse have been educated about that, they'll prepare that case, give it to the Attorney General's office. They'll be in court, they'll be prosecuted, and our women will be safer. And that's what our objective is. In a sense, that's sovereignty as well. In dealings with the state of Oklahoma, I think it's a relationship and communication that we need to make sure that we continually communicate with them and be involved with them, and that they understand what sovereignty is and isn't as well. And I think that with the new administration in the state, we have opportunities. The Attorney General's been up there recently, meeting with the state Attorney General and the other general counsels of the 4 tribes. And so, our folks are doing their work, and we'll continue to identify where we both exercise and defend our sovereignty on any issue.
Speaking of the state of Oklahoma, has the new Governor Stitt, given you any signs or any indication of how he's going to be dealing with tribes? It's always been a pretty sticky situation. And I understand he's appointed Lisa Billy as his Secretary of Native American Affairs.
Right. So Governor Stitt has fulfilled a promise that he had made, I guess, during the campaign. I didn't hear that directly, but had heard about that, to have a cabinet-level position for Indian Affairs. He's appointed someone to that position, member of the Chickasaw Nation, former legislator, well known to many of us, and so she's active, and so it's good to have that in place. Now, there's no budget for that position yet, and so she's, I think, doing it at no cost. Doesn't have a salary, so I give her credit for doing that and accepting the challenge. Second, I think, is that the governor is organizing a tribal leaders summit, or summits that will take place this year. I know we've been contacted about that, and there's several things that they're looking at. Is how does the state work with the tribes, on matters of sovereignty, but also matters of economic development? What can we do together to improve the economic situation, in our case within the Mvskoke Creek Nation, but throughout the state? And what opportunities exist for us to work together. So I think we'll see how that rolls out. We've not had a meeting yet. I think there's a work group that he has identified as, touching base with the different tribes. And as I mentioned before, I think we'll either see one or several meetings this year, and then it will be an ongoing work group that will advise Ms. Billy and the governor of the issues that we see that are important to Indian country in Oklahoma.
Well, one more question about that secretary position. In past years, we really hasn't seen too much come out of it. I mean, the first one there, Jackie Hensley, and then Chris Benj. I don't recall seeing any initiatives at all coming out of that position. I think Hensley did one for her own tribe and then ended up being chairperson. And Mr. Benj, bless his heart, was a wonderful man. I met him and talked with him several times, but I still didn't see anything coming out. So do you have any expectations for the new one, Ms. Billy?
Well, I do. One, because she, Chris Benj has been a legislator as well. Lisa has also. And I think that, one, it's incumbent on the tribes to really bring issues of substance to the table. And it would be great if our issues align with other tribes' issues, so that we have some substance and some momentum. That, I think, will force the governor to recognize that we have substantial issues. I think that there's going to be an education of the substantial impact the tribal economies have in the state of Oklahoma. I know that it's been said that, as the state is trying to woo business to the state or to keep them in the state of Oklahoma, the largest corporations of the states are the tribes, and they're not leaving. This is their home, so we're already here. So invest in them, and the state would be better off. And so in that regard, the Creek Nation and the other 4 tribes are preparing. I think there's more than that. I think there's about 19 of the tribes in the state of Oklahoma working on economic development impact studies with their individual tribes. The Intertribal Council wants to do that individually, and we have a report that will be coming out later this spring or early summer. But collectively, we also want to put a report together to show the total impact of the economy of the state of Oklahoma by the 5 tribes. And so once they see that, I think that will open a lot of eyes of the opportunities they have in relationships with us.
Let's shift gears one more time. Let's go back and review the master plan itself. And particularly, is there secure funding for some of the ideas you've got?
So the master plan continues to evolve visibly. We haven't seen the construction, I guess, of things related to the master plan. There's a lot of work in the details of both the financing and available resources and the priority as well of the master plan. So we're working on that aspect as we speak. I had a meeting yesterday about both the priority of the master plan, and the master plan in brief has like 4 elements to it. Which element or which elements come first, which elements would be the ones that would bring resources and employment to the nation and has the highest demand for need at this point. And then what's going to be the cost and how we're going to afford to get things out there. I think that priorities we'll continue to work on that here in probably the next month or two, and then begin to get a good estimate of the cost of the overall plan and begin to find the financing for the pieces that need to come first. So it's going to take several years to roll that out, but we're making progress on it and hopefully have something that we can report publicly very soon. I think we'll have public meetings as well as what it looks like, so that people can have some input on, are we on the right page with this? Are there tweaks that need to be made to this? Revise it so that it meets the needs of our citizens. So we'll be going through that exercise here in the next few months as well.
Well, for folks who aren't familiar with the master plan, you mentioned 4 points, 4 topics. Perhaps you could capsulize and list them for us real quick.
One's the governmental part of it, and in that regard, we're really talking about the complex, the 40 acres that the complex sits on. Those buildings, or some of those are 40 years or more old. They need updating to significant degree for accessibility, for efficiency and utilities and things like that, and for location, so that we can better coordinate the staff we have to meet the needs of our citizens and the public. That aspect is, so we take governmental and that aspect of it, and that's part number 1. We have the economic development aspect of it and the omniplex grounds, which would be multi-use, both economic and for tourism and recreation. The demand is increasing. There's more people coming to Okmulgee, more people wanting to use our facilities. And so, that's a good signal to us. And so we want to make sure that we define how we meet the needs and the resources that it will bring and the payoff time, so that our investment is going to be sound. The third part of it is what we call the old industrial site north of town, and its development and that will include both economic and governmental functions going over to that property. The fourth is a country club site, which will be devoted to tourism and recreation to some extent, but also house cultural and historic preservation and be a living center for the public to come to and for other tribal members to come and to see our living culture. So those four elements we have identified and have, a bigger picture view of. We've had architects design what it could look like. We're to the point now of finalizing the sizes of the structures and their purpose, and then defining what's the cost it's going to take to put them in place, and then the return on that, so that we make sure that if we have to borrow any money for it, that we have a way that we can pay that off without encumbering the nation in any other way.
I think we've seen a demonstration of the possibilities with the dome. You've had two major basketball tournaments there that people have enjoyed and attended. And that's after you put in a new floor, and God bless them, they replaced those seats. The reaction was, it's a great facility. We enjoyed playing here. It was central, good parking, this kind of thing. So you see that as a real jewel in that crown.
Well, I think that the investment's paid off. I was told that we had about 12,000 people attend overall in the two tournaments. We're pleased that two of the state champions came out of Okmulgee. So we got off to a great start. It's also created a demand and interest. The Oklahoma Secondary Schools Association, after the area tournament, 2 weeks ago, have already reached out to tourism and recreation about next year. Independent leagues, some of the colleges and other schools. There's been talk of the need for an independent tournament. So that venue really elevated the visibility of the nation as well. With 12,000 visitors to Okmulgee, we had an impact on the economy. So it also highlighted the fact that people want to come here, and as we talked about the master plan, the need for an expo center that we had planned, and those other changes to that property over there. I think we have a demand that we could meet through the development of that property, and so I think that's going to elevate the priority of that property over there, so that the demand is met in various ways, so that we have venues to take care of practically any activity that people would want to have, whether it be outside with the sports, softball, rodeo, things like that, that we have premier space and attract people to our locations. And again, that's bringing revenue. The concession stand did very well in the tournaments, and so those types of things were pleasant surprises in the past few months.
A lot of free toes got sold. And now, let me ask you about something that isn't in our area but is important to our people, and that's the Okmulgee Mounds expansion. That's quite a bright spot there for the Park Service and whoever to kind of elevate its position and expand it.
We're very pleased. I think the last time we spoke, the Congress was still considering the Okmulgee Mounds expansion bill, and the Okmulgee Mounds located near Macon, Georgia. We're pleased to say that, yesterday the president signed the law to expand the Okmulgee Mounds and rename it to a National Historic Park. Was signed. It adds an additional 2,000 acres to the present 700-acre park. The thing that's, I think significant to the Mvskoke Creek people is that archaeologists and researchers have documented Mvskoke people presence on that property for more than 600 years. So that was our home before we were removed here. With the passage of the law, there's a study that's going to be undertaken of the additional 2,000 acres and the river corridor in that area. And our historic and cultural preservation staff will be involved. They've already reached out to us, and we may participate in that study. We have people qualified to do the ground penetrating radar and environmental studies. So it's a natural fit for them to use us because it's basically our history that we're looking at. We're in negotiations with the National Park Conservancy Association, I believe, and the National Park Service on a multi-year agreement so that the Mvskoke Youth Council can send people down there in the summer months, and they rotate through the park and have opportunities to be involved with, counting species of birds and fish and other wildlife in the area, get that firsthand knowledge. But visitors coming to the park will see Mvskoke people taking care of that park. I think that's significant as well. And then the relationship just between the city of Macon, Georgia, and Mvskoke Creek Nation has really developed over the last 18 months or so as we've worked with them to get the bill passed. And so Senate Bill 47 is now a public law, and we'll get the number of that law soon. But, I think that's significant in that, they recognize our past presence in that area and be celebrated from now on. So I think very good news for everybody there.
Wonderful. It's nice to hear of our own people being part of it. The young people, that youth group is amazing. And to know that they will be down there on our own homelands, our own ancestral home. That's wonderful. Now, the next question, I don't really know that you can tell me anything, but that's the Friedman case. They've actually filed and included you in that. Is there anything you can share with that?
Well, it continues to be an ongoing case, and because I am named in the litigation, I can't really say anything about it, other than I think that we have good counsel representing us, and so we'll see the outcome of that, I hope, very soon. It was filed in the Washington, D.C. District Court, and so through the Attorney General's office and our outside legal counsel, I think we're very well represented in regards to any comments. I can't say anything about it.
How about, are there any dates being announced?
I've not heard of any dates on that. I think we've made our final pleadings to the court, and the court's got that under consideration.
Okay. Let's lighten the load here. We are going to be looking at the festival coming up in June, one of the highlights of our Mvskoke calendar. It's always a huge undertaking for practically the entire staff. And a chance to work with the city of Okmulgee once more, and probably the biggest event in the calendar in town, isn't it?
I believe so, yes.
So how are we doing there? We got things being put together now?
Well, I know that Tourism Recreation, who oversee the event and the venue as well, are continuing to work on finalizing the entertainment for the 2 nights, the tournaments that go on, the vendors that come in. I think they're working on getting that list finalized. So a lot of work is being undertaken for the event in June. And again, I think that our objective is to provide a good family atmosphere. People can come there, feel safe, and have fun, because that's what we want to do. It's a reunion for our people and our guests, and so we want to make it that. I will say one thing related to that, in a way, is that last year we had the National Weather Service involved with us, and as you may recall, a storm hit the day after the festival, but because of our involvement with the National Weather Service, we predicted, they predicted that storm coming through, and as you might recall, on that Saturday night, our staff worked to make sure that as many people as could pack up and leave. And so when the storm hit the next morning, the damage was minimal because a lot of people had heeded the advice and left. Just this morning, the National Weather Service from Tulsa came back to Okmulgee and provided a certificate to me and to the nation, because in our relationship with the National Weather Service, we've now become the first tribe in the state of Oklahoma to become what they call weather ready. And so that certification means a lot because it shows that we have a relationship with the National Weather Service, emergency management in the county, within the nation itself, and that we take a lot of steps and involve a lot of partners in ensuring that our people are educated and informed of the weather. And, obviously the most significant event is the festival, but every day. And today's no difference. We got storm coming through, so, they'll be communicating out to our folks. And so I think internally on the daily basis, and it was this winter as well, is the emergency management will send out emails to the staff and let them know, what's the forecast, what preparations we need to make, and to take some worries away from them and give them some direction on what to do that day. And it's good. So I really want to give a thanks to the National Weather Service and our emergency management folks for getting us prepared so that we can have that designation.
Right. I actually interviewed the Weather Service folks last year before festival, and wonderful people, friendly stuff, and a lot of information that we got. They were able to give me an idea that, one, it's going to be hot, and two, that there is a possibility of some weather effects. I remember seeing the photo of the storm having relocated one of the rides into the safety booth.
Yes, that's true.
That, oh my God, like this could have been a whole lot worse if that relationship wasn't taken advantage of.
So you could kind of either say that was luck or the fact of good preparation. And I think it's good preparation because that night a lot of people were able to secure their things and remove them. And then when the storm hit, there wasn't that much out there. So we were very fortunate.
Yeah, it didn't have any fry bread flying around. Okay, speaking of festivals and things, this is wild onion season. Will you be making the rounds of some of these dinners? Are you going to be able to get out and enjoy some of the dafumbachi?
I hope so. Get some in the freezer, but the events is so much a part of our culture. It's great just to go and be with other folks and eating wild onions that we have for since we were kids. So I enjoy that very much, and I hope to get out to more of them. And but I have to balance that with other things. I have the weekends aren't always free to go into the communities as much as I'd like, be involved with the events. I kind of have to make sure I can work that into where I may be needed that day.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a schedule that we'll be sharing later on in this program, and I looked at the calendar, and we have two of them this weekend, and two really good ones. So it's going to be a tough one to make a decision. Well, we darn near run out of questions. Is there anything on your mind that we haven't touched on?
Well, I just want to give a congratulatory shout out, I guess, to the Johnson O'Malley program. Last week I went to the banquet of the National Johnson O'Malley Association in Las Vegas. It's like the 25th anniversary, and to see the outpouring of support and recognition that they have for the Mvskoke Creek Nation I wish everybody could have been there. We received several recognitions. The Henrietta Public School Johnson O'Malley program, they got the region's program of the year. So it's great to see people from Henrietta out there and to see their efforts being recognized, because a lot of these people are volunteers that give their time to help the children. Jackie White, who's 44 years as a teacher at Union Public Schools, and a significant influence in the Johnson O'Malley program, got the Educator of the Year award nationally. So that's like the top award, and to have someone from within the Mvskoke Creek Nation get that was very pleasing. And then they recognized the tribe as a whole for our significant support of the Johnson O'Malley program, and I think they gave us it was the Platinum Award, I think, for support And I think, again, we're fortunate that the reauthorization of the Johnson O'Malley program was signed off on again. So another congressional win for us. It also brings challenges because now we have to go kind of exercise the authorities that were provided under Johnson O'Malley. The new student counts need to be undertaken. The refinements of the authority or the interpretation of what was authorized and what will become reality. So the work doesn't stop for them, but I think that we are very well represented, and from Union Public Schools, which they also got an award for the Teacher of the Year for their region. Henrietta, Mvskoke Creek Nation. We had folks from Tulsa. We had Eufaula. We had volunteers from all over the Creek Nation that was there. So in that event, which I'd say 300 or 400 people attended the banquet, it's great to see recognition of our own people.
As usual, I always think of something else I want to ask you after I've already told you I was done. The Indian Child Welfare Act has been under fire recently in a couple of major cases, some for, some against, and has drawn concern of tribes all over the nation. So where are we in that situation? Are we taking action? We've got some good folks putting that law to work, but do you have some thoughts there?
Yes, and the Burkina case is the case that's being worked back on appeal through the federal court system, and because the federal district court out of North Texas, the two principal local tribes that's involved in that are Choctaw and Cherokee. The Mvskoke Creek Nation filed an amicus brief to the appeal, so we are involved as well. So at the next Intertribal Council meeting, I'm sure we will have significant discussions about that. It is a challenge to the Indian Child Welfare Act. Again, it's a sovereignty issue that we see, that we need to win that case. We need to prevail on the responsibility and the authority to take care of our own families and our own children. And it's a national case. There's a lot of individuals that have other perspectives on the case, but I think, and I feel confident that, after probably a prolonged course here, that the tribes will prevail and will then go on to further strengthen the Indian Child Welfare Act.
Okay, well, let's hope everything goes that way. Principal Chief James Floyd, we want to thank you for taking this time from this incredible schedule you have and filling us in, bringing us up to date, and helping us out here. So we appreciate you.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. We'll say hello to everybody. Thanks for listening and for being on the show today. Hello.
Gia Juthas.